Hi everyone, my name is Marcellus. We're continuing our sermon series looking at the life of Daniel, trying to work out how he managed to flourish so incredibly well in Babylon, and what we can take from his life and apply to our own. And today we're looking at chapter 1 verse 8. It says this: "But Daniel resolved to not defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way." So Daniel does this, what I think is quite a strange thing, bearing in mind all that's gone on before, all that's happened to him. He's had his name changed, he's been castrated, he's been kidnapped, he's been forced into the service of an enemy government. And now in verse 8, he makes this stand about food and wine. He rather politely goes to the chief official and asks permission. He says, I just don't want to defile myself by eating the royal food and wine. And there are a few different theories as to why he chooses this, why he's making a fuss about eating and drinking wine. The one that I find the most convincing is that the food and wine is likely to have been consumed as sort of part of a big pagan festival. There's likely to have been worship of other gods and praying to other gods as part of the consumption of the food and wine. And what Daniel does, and I think this is the important thing, this is the thing that we really want to look at, is he makes a stand. He decides to draw a line between himself and the culture around it, because he knows that otherwise he'll be consumed by that culture. He'll be so absorbed into the culture that's all around him that in the end he ends up no different. And that's why we're teaching through the life of Daniel, because the great danger that Daniel now faces in Babylon is the great danger that we face here today. That's just been absorbed, becoming part of the culture, being no different. It's the great danger that Jesus prays against for his disciples. In John 17, he prays particularly and repeatedly that we would be sanctified. And sanctified is just a way of saying that we would be set apart, that we would be different, that we would be separate from the world, that we would be holy, belonging to God, rather than being consumed by the world around us. And Jesus prays that because he knows that you and I, given half the chance, will worship other gods. And that's the huge temptation for Daniel. I think in Daniel's day it was more obvious, because in Babylon there are gods everywhere. There are temples everywhere. There are places to pray to the god of the sun for your crops. There are places to sacrifice to the god of fertility for your children. There's places to worship the god of war for protection. And gods are pictured in statues, and they're on gates. They're everywhere. And it's obvious in Babylon that these are competing gods. Gods that want to take Daniel away from worshipping the one true God and instead cause him to worship them. But you know what? Our world today is completely the same. Everywhere we look, there are competing gods. They hold up the offer. They say, come and worship me and I'll make you happy. Come and serve me and I'll make your life fulfilled. That's what adverts are. And at its root, that's what sin is. Romans 1 says that sin is worshipping and serving created things. So that could be other people, that could be our families, that could be our children, that could be bodies, that could be sex, that could be money, that could be power. I think more often than not, that is simply worshipping ourselves, our own comfort. Worshipping those things, worshipping those alternative gods who aren't gods, rather than the Creator. And so to put a bit of flesh on it, to make it a bit real, I would say my personal favourite alternative god, the one that actually I find myself wandering to worship most often, is comfort. Is my own personal comfort. You know, just thinking I'm going to get refreshed, just thinking I'm going to find life, just thinking I'm going to find wholeness and satisfaction through doing exactly what I want to do all the time, be it watching a lot of television, be it drinking a lot of alcohol, be it eating a lot of food, be it through my house and garden looking like in a certain way. I believe a lie in my heart, so I wander and begin to worship created things. And God calls me back and says, actually, there's a life in worshipping me. And not only does worship of created things and other gods lead to death and not life and not satisfy us, but when we worship created things, when we worship other gods and idols, we become like everyone else. And we ruin our witness about God. John Lennox says this in his really good commentary on the book of Daniel. He says, surely it is elementary spiritual logic that if we wish to persuade others that God is real and that it's possible to have a vibrantly meaningful relationship with him, we have to be personally loyal to God and his Son and adjust our lives to be consistent with our fundamental Christian confession, Jesus Christ is Lord. Daniel, and he's talking particularly about this incident that we're looking at, Daniel knew that defilement would spoil his relationship with God and undermine his personal testimony. We just become unbelievable. If we're worshipping the same gods as the world around us, we can't say, come and worship our God. If the way we live our life looks exactly the same as the world around us, with the same fears, with the same concerns, with the same priorities, we can't say, come and worship our God, because we're not even doing it. But none of this is to say that that's easy. I mean, for Daniel, it must have been an incredible temptation to just simply forget who he was, to simply forget the pain of the past, forget God, and throw himself into the culture of Babylon. That's our temptation as well. It's easier. It's easier to be accepted by our friends, to not have any awkward views, to basically just go with a bit of self-worship rather than worshipping God. It's easier to not make a fuss, it's not cause a stir, to be like everyone else and not be holy. And not only is it easy, but it's tempting, because the world and Babylon offers us meaning, identity and status. Daniel could have been this rich and powerful and intelligent, well-respected, sophisticated guy. That's what was on the table. He's lost everything. And Babylon's saying, well, actually, if you just sit there and eat this, if you just keep quiet, if you just are the same as everyone else, we can give you a new identity. We can give you a new status. And our society offers us exactly the same. Just be like everyone else. Don't make a fuss about prayer or Bible reading. Don't be one of those religious types who doesn't watch some things on television or doesn't drink too much. Don't be one of those religious types who makes a prayer a priority, makes Bible reading a priority, makes going to church a priority. Just be like everyone else. Just come and get your identity. Come from the world around us. But the problem is that the identity that the world and Babylon offers us doesn't work. And it doesn't work. I'll give you two reasons it doesn't work. Number one, it's a self-made, competition-based identity. So the world wants us to be rich, it wants us to be smart, it wants us to be good looking, it wants us to be rebellious, it wants us to be wild, it wants us to be tough, it wants us to be creative. But when you have to make your own identity, it's got to be constantly sustained. You just got to keep going at it. You know, I'm this type of guy, I'm this type of person, I'm this type of, this is my identity. You've got to keep maintaining that. And you've got to maintain that in competition with the world around you. What happens if someone's coming who's smarter than you, who's younger than you, who's more rebellious than you, who's more creative than you. You've got to be constantly looking in your rear view mirror and sharpening your elbows. And that inevitably leads us to live in a lie. We project an image of who we are rather than letting people see who we are. So we keep people at arm's length, either because of competition, but also because otherwise they might find out the truth that we're not this totally smart, totally successful, totally altogether person. So the first problem is it's self-made and it's competition driven. The other problem is that it's bogus. With a self-made identity, in our heart of hearts, we know it's bogus. We've got this weird thing going on. You can literally sit on Facebook and watch it scroll in front of you. We live in an incredibly affirming culture that says, hey, do what you want to do, be who you want to be, and that you are an amazing superstar. So we've got that on one hand, and then on the other hand, we've got spiraling levels of anxiety and depression. And it's because we don't believe our own hype. We know that somehow self-affirmation doesn't work. Me simply saying, Marcellus, I think you are the best footballer that has ever lived. Me saying that again and again, and even me getting a little group of people around me who are saying, Marcellus, I think you're the best footballer that's ever lived. I know in my heart of hearts that's not going to get me a contract at Manchester United. Even the affirmation that we receive from other people doesn't really work. It's nice, it's good, and it's right to encourage. But ultimately, it doesn't fill the hole in our chest. Because I know who I am. I know who I am when I shut the door and when I turn the lights off and when I'm in the private place. I know my darkness. I know my weakness. I know the image that we project isn't true. So an identity based on what God says about us is completely different. Firstly, it's not competition based. God says all human beings have value because they're made in the image of God. Which we think, it's just at the beginning of the Bible. That is so profound and so deep and so life-changing. It's unbelievable. All human beings have value because they're made in the image of God. So our identity is not self-made and not self-sustained. We don't have to run harder and we don't have to sharpen our elbows because of competition. Instead, when our identity is based on what God says, it's also eternal and external. So it's not me, it's not my own hype. It's not me just saying, Marcellus, I think you're fantastic. Marcellus, I think you're fantastic. Instead, it's a God who sees me when the door shuts, who knows who I am, who knows my darkness and my weakness, and knows your darkness and knows your weakness, and yet deeply loves you and deeply loves me. So that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? So why is it so hard to say no to the identity the world offers us and yes to God's? It's because the identity the world offers us is easy and it's instant. It's right here, it's right now. We want to be liked, we want to be popular, we want to be appreciated, we want people to be impressed with us. We want our reward in this world. And the thing with Daniel is he's looking for a reward from a different place. He's looking for a heavenly reward. Daniel's not eating the king's food to make a statement to the world. It does have that effect, but Daniel's major concern is to be pure, is to be holy, is to be sanctified, is to be set apart for God, to be different from the world around him, simply because he belongs to God. And that's what a life of faith is. It's living for God and not for the world. In Hebrews 11, it says this about Moses. I love it. It could easily be applied to Daniel. In fact, it could be applied to anyone who wants to follow Jesus and live by faith. It says, he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead for his reward. Daniel, like Moses, was looking by faith for that same reward. He wasn't looking for a reward in the world, he was looking for a reward from God. And we want to copy Daniel and be a church that does that lives by faith. So therefore, I'm inviting us to remember who we are, to together take a week and rededicate ourselves to God, to set ourselves apart for Him, to say we're not controlled by the things of the world. We don't belong primarily to the world. We belong to God. So I want us to spend a week praying for our church and for the church in the nations and across the world. So we're going to have a week of prayer and fasting. It's going to start Monday the 1st of March and it's going to finish Sunday the 7th, hopefully with an in-flesh prayer meeting. For the rest of the week, we're going to be praying 3 times a day on Zoom, and we're going to pray at 6:30, we're going to pray at 12:30 in the afternoon, and we're going to pray at 7:30 in the evening. The fasting side of things is down to you. It's your choice of what and how you want to fast. So some of you might want to fast all food for the week, or you might want to fast a type of food or television or social media or caffeine. The point is that we are sacrificing something that brings us comfort in the world to declare that our ultimate comfort and hope and reward is in God Himself. So you guys choose whatever you feel like God's pushing you towards, or whatever you think would be a great sacrifice for you to make. And we're doing that because Hebrews says this: because you are like living stones, you, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. God bless you guys.
What gift of grace is Jesus my